This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert, on 53-man initial roster day. Not necessarily the final, but, we can talk about it still because there were some interesting choices, I suppose you could say. There's also a lot of choices that make a lot of sense. So why don't we get into it, Adam?
You betcha. An exciting day because it means we're one step closer to real football. That always excites me a great deal. And like you mentioned, it is the initial 53-man roster. There's a good chance that this changes a bit even over the next couple of weeks. So we'll see. But cool discussions to be had about a lot of different things. Really excited for some guys, a sad day for some other guys. So, some mixed emotions, but overall, I'm jacked up to talk about it, man.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of players that made the cuts today as far as that were cut and that we wanted to see ultimately on the roster. But those are players that could potentially be on the practice squad. I'm even seeing some of those names in the chat already as we are live out on YouTube, youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast. You can join us there. And if you are subscribed, you get notified when we are going live. So if those folks who are here in the chat, give us a little like, and it just helps out the show. We've got Amy here. I see Jay in the chat. I see Clinton on the Seahawkers podcast account, and I see our live executive producer, Ryan911, with the $9.99 super chat. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, Ryan. Appreciate it unbelievably much, as always. And yeah, Brandon, let's get into it. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start offense, defense? Because I just kind of think we go by position group. Yeah,
sure. Well, we could start with the offense because that's what Seahawks.com has up on the top, and we'll just start up at the top. Although they don't, why don't they put all the wide receivers together? Why do they have to line it up as if it's an actual offense and have one wide receiver on one side of the line and two of the other wide receivers on the other side of the line? This is not, it would make more sense just to group them all together, but here we go. DK Metcalf among the finals. No surprise there, along with Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. We've got Jake Bobo, Laviska Shenault, and wide receiver number 6, Derek Young.
Yeah, you bet. Look at this list, and I go, yep, that makes all the sense in the world to me. Totally fine with it. I understand that Easop Winston Jr. had a nice preseason, but Derek Young is a guy that has been talked about throughout training camp, and this preseason is a guy who always does the right thing, is always where he's supposed to be, and is a good special teams player. So, look, I'm fine with it. What, you're going to keep D. Eskridge instead? I mean, give me a break.
I think I would have gone Winston over Derek just because, well, and I suppose if you're going to keep a guy in at wide receiver 6 for blocking, although he did have some whiffs in the preseason, Derek did, but that's fine. It, if you're going to, it was going to be tough either way. And I liked the idea of rewarding Easop Winston for a really nice preseason that he had.
For sure. Could be one of the dudes that ends up on the practice squad. We don't know about any of that yet. Yeah. And there's a few of those names we're going to talk about today that I think we're all going to look at and go, holy smokes, if we could get him to practice squad, that would be great. And hopefully that's the case with, Easop Winston Jr. We did keep a different D. We'll get to that when we get to defense. And I think that's one of the more interesting ones to me in some cases.
Well, continuing with pass catchers, we'll move on to tight ends. Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown, Brady Russell making the team along with A.J. Barner. No real surprises here. Just happy that Brady Russell ultimately made the squad.
Yeah, and listed as the third guy. I think he's going to get a little more playing time early, depending on these Noah Fant, Pharaoh Brown injuries. I don't know that we've had too much update on that. So makes sense to have 4 on the roster, considering we're a little unclear as to the health status of Fant and Brown.
Yeah, and I think Jack Westover is somebody you could slip through to the practice squad, and especially being a local guy from Washington. Yeah, I think that's possible. I don't understand why at Seahawks.com you have Noah Fant with the first offense, Pharaoh Brown with the second offense, Brady Russell with the fourth, and A.J. Barner with the fifth, and just leave the third spot wide open. That's an interesting choice.
Hey, look, if they have to get the third string tight end, Brandon, they're just going to go 4 wide and they just won't put one out there. That's what that means right there.
That is exactly what it means.
Yeah.
Running back, no surprises. K9, Zach Charbonnet, Kenny McIntosh. I did that. At least that wasn't a surprise to me. I suppose the question mark was whether or not they would keep 4 running backs, but George Holani not making the cut, unfortunately.
Yeah, that one bums me out a little bit. I was kind of hoping that they'd end up keeping all 4 backs. I really like what I saw out of all of them. I was a little more inclined to lean towards Kenny McIntosh for the 3rd spot than Holani, but I really like his play style, the way that George runs. So, unfortunately, not going to be on the initial 53-man roster. We'll see where he goes from here.
And then looking at the offensive line group, we've got 10 folks making the team: Charles Cross, Laken Tomlinson, Connor Williams, Olu Oluwatimi, Jalen Sundell, Anthony Bradford, Christian Haynes, who are both in at first team right guard. So I think ultimately you're going to have to make a decision because you can't play 2 right guards at the same time. But if that's what they choose to do, then that's an interesting choice.
It would be an interesting choice, but then again, we have seen the Seahawks try to play all right guards at once on the offensive line. They just don't put them at right guard. So yeah, another decision that we are still waiting on. I think I'm leaning towards Haynes, but if it ends up being Bradford, it's not going to, hurt my feelings or anything.
George Fant, Stone Forsyth, Michael Jarrell, we got Satoa Laumea, and we've got, of course, Abe Lucas, who was put on the PUP list, so he's going to be out the first 4 weeks, but here he is on the 53-man roster. So we're still holding out hope, Adam, that we are going to see Abe Lucas eventually. For now, he is listed as the 4th string right tackle.
This might have been the hardest news from today because honestly, I'm starting to lose a little hope on this one. Yeah, week 5 at best. We'll see. But it hasn't been trending the direction I was hoping.
No, and again, it's interesting how they do this depth chart with just shoving everybody in at right tackle and Charles Cross and Laken Tomlinson, the 2 sole offensive linemen on the left side of the line.
Yeah, they better stay healthy.
That's the thing, and that's probably why they ended up keeping 11 offensive linemen, because that's, I think, what it says to me is that they're concerned about health at a couple of different positions. It was interesting to me that Jalen Sundell was the 3rd string center when, you'd think you'd keep 2, but Connor Williams, his injury late in the season, it does lead me to wonder if he's going to be out there week 1 or if it's going to take him a couple weeks to get back out there and ready. It was a good thing that he wasn't on the PUP list along with some of the others, because then you're looking at 4 weeks into the season. But maybe it takes him a week or 2 before he is up and out there with the first team offense.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent insight. I agree with you completely. This does seem to signal that, Connor Williams week 1 may be unlikely.
It may be. All right. And Geno Smith, Sam Howell, PJ Walker. Unfortunately, we are still continuing the Seahawks tradition of only carrying 2 quarterbacks into the regular season.
Okay, well then I would have one request from John Schneider. It sounds like Tyler Huntley is not exactly in favor in Cleveland. They're keeping the 4 QBs for now, but go get that dude. I want him to compete against Sam Howell for the backup position. I think he's a darn good quarterback. He was a Pro Bowler not but 2 years ago.
Right.
And he can't, you're telling me that DTR is better than him? He looked pretty serviceable to me in this last preseason game against the Hawks. So that would be one of the things that I'd like to see, because that's somebody that Mike has a little familiarity with. And I think that dude can ball.
I was intrigued by just the fact that the Browns rolled out so many quarterbacks so deep into the game that were known players. Like, they didn't have a QB5 scrub.
Right. Yeah. They were collecting them all.
Yeah. So here we go on the defensive side. I think we covered everybody on offense, right?
Sure.
Starting up front with the The front four, we've got Leonard Williams, Jonathan Hankins, Jaron Reed, Draymond Jones in that rush defensive line position, and then backed up by Mike Morris, Cam Young, Byron Murphy, Boye Mafe, and there he is, Miles Adams making the team.
Yeah, so Clinton's man crush, friend of the show, Miles Adams makes the team. I'm glad to see it. I thought he played pretty darn well throughout the preseason, was super active, and seemed to work really well with Mike Moe for whatever reason. Maybe it's just because they played a lot of snaps together, but really enjoyed his play throughout the preseason. And I think that's a really solid group when you start getting down to it. There's not a lot of weaknesses there.
No, and it explains why it was tough for Jamie Sheriff, I think, to make this team just based on that amount of depth. And that's a guy that I think it's possible he's not getting picked up by another team. I believe. Now, he may change my mind and get picked up, but I think he is a strong practice squad candidate.
I would hope so. I mean, he's more of an edge guy. I don't know that he belongs with the group that we just talked about here, but it is interesting in the fact that they went out and traded for Travis Gibson. And I think that was the writing on the wall for Jamie Sheriff. And that said, you look at Gibson, and I remember noticing him a couple times when he was with the Bears. I mean, like, I kind of like that dude. He looks the part, and he's a guy, that's somebody that you'd want out there. And for them to pick him up here late with the Chena news, I think is huge.
So that must not be a final transaction then based off of this 53-man roster, because I don't see Travis up here.
Oh, he is on the Seahawks website, just in their little article about the final 53. He's listed with the 5 outside linebackers.
Okay. And looking at so the opposite side of the line, if we are including the guys like Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall in with that defensive line group. They have him down as a Sam linebacker, but yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall making the team. No surprise.
No surprise. Kind of your 2 starting ends, it looks like, are going to be Mafe and Hall. And I feel pretty comfortable with that. And I think Gibson's a big upgrade over Darrell Taylor on the edge as a backup player. I mean, Gibson's actually solid against the run. I watched a film breakdown by Matty Dubbs, and maybe he just picked the best game that Gibson's ever played when he was with the Bears. But I mean, holy smokes, blowing up run plays, getting good pass rush, better pass rusher than a run stuffer, but still serviceable in the run, where Darrell Taylor was a disaster.
Yeah. And I think that, as much as we wonder if John Schneider still would have made that trade with the Bears with the Uchenna Nwosu injury, I think that he would have. I think that the idea of bringing Gibson in still ends up being an upgrade based on what Mike Macdonald wants to do with the defense.
I think so too. And I think that's why you make that move with Jacksonville. It does kind of bring a song to mind about the sheriff and deputies and things like that, for sure, Nate. And yeah, we did end up cutting Jamie. And I do think it's just because that Gibson's a proven NFL player and has had a couple really good years in the league. And, Jamie's undrafted free agent, and sure, he showed out against lesser competition, but they see some things in practice too. Again, I'd be thrilled to see him end up on the practice squad.
This 53-man roster, as far as the depth chart goes, and looking at the linebackers, it illustrates to me exactly how I feel about the linebacker spot, because we have Tyrell Dodson, Jerome Baker as first team linebackers. Then we have blank spots in for the second team linebackers. We've got Tyrese Knight in third string position, and then Drake Thomas all the way over in fifth. This feels about how I feel.
Okay. I don't know what the Seahawks are doing on their webpage here. It's just weird. The surprise to me on this one is obviously Drake Thomas. I mean, I think I would have rather kept Radigan or the Kalispell kid O'Connell. I thought both those guys played way better in the preseason. I don't know what the Drake Thomas, obsession is, but they seem to really like the guy. I know it's a guy that Clinton's huge on, but I really feel like those 2 other guys outplayed him for the entire preseason.
I can't think of Drake Thomas plays from the preseason.
Yeah, I can't think of one either. I remember noticing he was on the field once, and that was it.
Yeah, well, Clinton's happy, so there's that. But again, if I'm complaining about who's making it between Radigan, O'Connell, Drake Thomas, I feel like when you get to that level, I want actual guys who would belong in the second team column.
I think they
as
do.
backups.
I honestly think that they do. I think Tyrese Knight acquitted himself as a backup level player throughout the preseason. And I really do think Radigan showed out in a way that, to me, he looked like a clear-cut favorite to be one of the backup inside linebackers. But Dotson has looked good in the little time that we've seen him, and we just haven't seen really Baker much. So I'm just going to bank on the fact that everybody in Miami, all the Fish fans, they seem to really love the guy and think he's a heck of a player. So just got to kind of cross my fingers on that one.
Jason asking in the chat,
Yeah.
is this chart this way according to the compensation that they're playing for? I don't necessarily know why they did it this way, and I just think it's fun commentary. I don't know if there really is any rhyme or reason to why they laid it out this way in particular, but I just am pointing things out and commenting on it, especially for the non-visual audience. They may be wondering how these players are affixed to the depth chart on the 53-man roster. But we've got the defensive backs here: Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen at the corner spots, Rayshon Jenkins, Julian Love at safety. And then we've got Trey Brown, Nehemiah Pritchett, D. Williams, and Kayvon Wallace, Kobe Bryant on the back end, along with Jarek Reed. And Jarek Reed was put on the PUP list.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's going to need a little more time. And that gives me a little bit of hope because, one, keeping Kobe Bryant frustrates me.
It's fine. It's fine.
Me.
Who would you have kept instead of Kobe?
Well, right now, nobody's really healthy, but it seems like, I don't know. He's just a dude. I just don't see anything that stands out about Kobe Bryant other than his name. And honestly, I would have rather kept Marquise Blair. I would have.
Honestly,
at least he hits.
Look, as soon as Michael Jackson was traded away from this team, Kobe Bryant was a stone cold lock because John Schneider, who is also famous for sharing a name with Bo Duke, is not going to allow this team not to have a guy who shares a name with another famous person.
Right. Yeah. No, that's how you make roster decisions. That's for sure. If you agree with making roster decisions like that, be sure to hit subscribe. But yeah, I thought Kobe Bryant was a head scratcher to me. And honestly, D. Williams was a head scratcher to me.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a head scratcher just based off of D's ability to play special teams. So whether or not I felt like whether you kept DJ James or D Williams, it's probably not that much of a difference based on what we saw in the preseason. I think had DJ had some of that extra special teams capability, that we probably see DJ James make this roster over D Williams.
Look, I thought DJ James had a couple great plays throughout the preseason. He was all around the football, had a nose for it. I liked him better as a defender than I did D Williams, but D Williams was the better return guy, obviously.
Right. And we'll see. Maybe D making that transition from wide receiver over to corner. Maybe he grows a little bit at that spot too.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Amy in the chat saying DJ couldn't cover. He was a good tackler though. But yes, it is probably more important to be not giving up the passes and being good at than being good at tackling and allowing the passes to be completed.
I don't think he was awful as a coverage guy. He was fine. I'm not going to go out and say that, he's anywhere close to, Reek or Witherspoon or anything like that. But a guy that's a rookie, a late round rookie, that he's going to need some time to become good at it. He's actually got the physical skill set to be able to grow into the position, whereas Kobe Bryant's just limited.
Yeah. Well, he could be on the outside, especially depending on when Jarek Reed is able to make his return. Artie Burns, another guy who isn't on this list, but who did make the 53-man roster and is on the PUP list.
Oh, okay. From what I had read, he was just gone. So that makes a little sense there. All right.
Well, maybe we'll see. Again, our 53-man roster, it's kind of, from what I've read initially and then what it shows here, there are some discrepancies. But Amy in the chat saying Burns let go. So
Okay.
that could be an injury waiver or
Yeah.
something like that.
I was wondering if that had to do with the injury.
Yeah.
Which would be just a rough way to go out.
Well, I think you ultimately can come back. Terminate. Oh my gosh, this sounds more serious than I thought.
Dunskies.
Like, they really let him go.
Yeah, it's curtains for Artie Burns.
R.I.P. Artie Burns. Jason Myers, Michael Dixon, obviously, and then kick returner Laviska Shenault in that number 1 spot. D. Williams listed as our only punt returner, and D. Williams listed as a backup kick returner along with Kenny McIntosh.
Okay.
And why is the long snapper not on here?
Yeah, this is terrible. I don't know what this rinky-dink depth chart is that the Seahawks are putting out on their website, but it's a nonsense depth chart.
Is Chris Stoll not a member of this team? What happened?
Yeah, long snapper lives matter, man. Come on.
It is still Chris Stoll, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, as we look at this, I think that, there are more opportunities for changes, and whether or not we're scouring the some of those other cuts for other teams and players that they've jettisoned ahead of their 53-man roster deadline, we could see some changes on the margins. I know maybe, I'm kind of with Amy. Long snapper shouldn't count toward the 53. Neither should kicker or punter. Just allow everybody a special team slot, and give us more roster spots for other guys.
Yeah, I have a feeling the owners aren't going to love that just because of, I don't know, they'd have to put out more salary, and the greedy bastards can't do it. Right. Or they can, but they won't.
The Shermanator in chat asking, so why trade for Barrett only to cut him? That seems incoherent.
I'm kind of in agreement with this one.
I think part of it is to say, yeah, we want you, and maybe we just want you on the practice squad.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, that would be about the only logical thing, right? Get him in the building, hope to get him to be excited about being there and being on the practice squad. But yeah, that seems like a really odd move to go out, bring him in for a cup of coffee, and then be like, yeah, no, see ya, and then give up draft capital, in the process. So
because Barrett's a late rounder, they'll bring him on the practice squad. I'm with Nate. I think that's ultimately the play there, but it is one of those, I figured that he would kind of be a lock for the 53 just based on making that trade.
Yeah. So as we see it now, Brandon, this 53-man roster, how excited are you for this on a scale of 1 to 12? When you look at this roster, how you feeling?
I'm at about a 9, just because when I look at the defense, especially, I'm circling the front 4 and front 5. Oh, that was one nice thing, and folks mentioned in the chat too, Nwosu not being on the PUP list leads us to believe that maybe it's more of an injury of the 2-week variety rather than the 4 to 6 week variety. So that was promising. But yeah, when I look at the depth at the first team and the second team for the front 5, I think that could really make this defense.
Oh, absolutely. I feel really good about what they've got going up front this year. Better than I've felt in years when you think about the defensive front. I'm probably about a 10, Ryan, about a 10, but that's pretty darn high. I see this roster and I go, there's no way that you can't be competitive with the Niners and the Rams and some of the upper echelon, quote unquote, teams in the NFC. I don't feel like you're going into any of those games like with a hand tied behind your back, like say the Cardinals or, go on down the list, right? Of teams that are either rebuilding or have perpetually been in stink mode.
Nate Schutz in the chat mentioning that they traded Jackson straight across for Michael Barrett. So they didn't necessarily give up any, Michael Jackson was going to get cut anyway.
Yeah.
As we look at this defensive back, I mean, I guess I would have rather had Michael Jackson over D. Williams or maybe even Kobe, but playing different positions. Again, special teams, I think, helping out D quite a bit. And so they didn't have to give up any draft capital for Barrett, at least.
Yeah. And, you guys here, O-line is still questionable. And I don't know that that's a terrible take. I think that, you know, Cross I think is very good, and we're good there. Connor Williams, I mean, remains to be seen coming off injury, but I am more than guardedly optimistic with that.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a very good player. I think whether it's Bradford or Haynes, I think either one of them can be an average NFL guard. And that's exactly what Tomlinson is. I think the thing that scares me the most is relying on Fant, but that's a little bit of just old PTSD of watching Fant be trotted out there early in his career since he went to the Jets and the Texans and all that. I think maybe he was with the Bears there for a minute too, but a guy I think that has worked on his craft and somebody that, again, can be average. Is it going to be a, you know, world beating offensive line? Absolutely not. But it feels a little better than last year.
Yeah. A little. This is going to be ultimately, this and middle linebacker still are the two weakest points on the roster. And that's not something that, unless you're making some kind of big time trade, I think that some of the moves that they made, especially with Radigan, I think that may have been a salary type issue because he was scheduled to make nearly $3 million based off of his tender amount. So
okay,
I think that might help with maybe if you end up bringing someone in, then yeah, I think that frees up cash for that, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I didn't realize that the money was that high. I know that's not a huge number, but it's a fairly big number. So yeah, maybe that ends up being reworked and he ends up coming back. But that'd be a bit to pay for a backup linebacker that you're really hoping to not see on the field.
No, and that's a really good point. So by releasing him now, if nobody then picks him up on his current deal, then you can bring him in and pay him game to game at the veteran minimum for a guy like Radigan. So I do think that would be one move that I would expect the team to go ahead and make as more of a veteran backup linebacker, and then that allows, you know, potentially somebody else to go back to the practice squad and off the 53.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. I liked this question from Derek. How many games will it take, Brandon, of this regular season until you feel like you've got a handle on this team and how they're doing for this season?
Man, how many? Well, it depends on. I don't think it's necessarily amount of games. It just depends on how they look through the first few. And, you know, if they stink, then I'll just be my optimistic self and say, well, I think that it's going to take a little bit of time and they're just going to, you know, get better. And then if they're awesome right away, it'll be confirming all my priors that we have an awesome team and we're going to the Super Bowl.
There you go. That is the most Brandon Schultz answer that you'll ever get in the world. No decision made. Just, yeah, you know, I'll feel good about it or bad about it and then feel good about it or maybe then feel bad. I'm going to say for me personally, it's going to be about 6-7 games. That's about enough to where you can start to get a feel for exactly what a team is. Although in the past, we've also seen times where, you know, the first half of the season, the team looks one way, and the second half of the season, it looks another. We saw that a lot with some of the Pete Carroll teams. But about 6-7 games, I think we can start to be like, all right, it's trending like this. I'm not going to get too up or too down through the first 3-4 weeks. I think there's a lot to be said after that as this new coaching staff comes together with their new schemes, with all of it. So, yeah, at least 6-7 weeks for me.
You say you're not going to allow yourself to get up, but I think that if they go out,
two up or two down, I'll still get excited. Of course I will. I'm a stupid fan. I'm going to get extra excited about stuff that I shouldn't. I guarantee it.
I mean, if they go out and they blow out the first 4 teams, then we'll be talking about how Ryan Grubb's the greatest offensive coordinator that we've had in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I guess this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like, I want to see how all of this looks late in the year when the weather turns and all of that stuff. I think that's going to be an important data point for how I feel about this team offensively. We'll see from there. But yeah, 6-7 weeks for me, man.
You're all about questioning based on the weather.
No, I'm not all about questioning based on the weather. What I am about is knowing that in the history of the NFL, a lot of the pass happy teams, if they aren't a dome team or don't get home field advantage, you get to play in their domes. Like, they do poorly in the postseason when the weather gets bad. It's just how it is. I didn't make it up. It's not my rule. It's just how it is.
One other position that I was a little bit surprised by, just based on the amount of time that we saw him in the preseason, was McClendon Curtis not making the final 53 on the offensive line.
I am 1,000% fine with that. Sounds great. Wish him well.
I thought he had some nice play in the preseason.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, Michael
I thought he had a lot of not nice play too, that outweighed the nice play. And apparently John Schneider and Mike Macdonald agree.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, any other questions? We are live here on YouTube. We've got 150 folks joining us.
Smokes.
And so, yeah, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, and we'll take some questions here in the chat. And hey, if you want to help support the show, getintheflock.com. That's another way to do it too. And we've got Derek Williamson saying they can adjust through the whole season, but I think we'll know how the offseason went in just a few games.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. To me, that just is too quick. I'm not, again, like with Macdonald and Grubb and Durde, like, I'm not having a judgment about them until, I don't know, this time of year, 2 years from now. Like, having a final judgment or close to a final judgment. I'm going to give these guys some time. They're young coaches.
Unless they're awesome right away, and then we crown them.
Hard. No, let's do that. I love that too. Yeah. I just try to be pragmatic, you know? Just take it week to week.
Clinton said in the Discord, it was the fourth in to Drell that put him over the top at the expense of Curtis. So yes, well done to Clinton. You helped shape this roster just based on the strength of 3 in, 3 out, and giving Drell that fourth in.
Oh, there it is, the 3-I-3-0 bump. I didn't realize.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, very powerful. It's a thing now.
Oh yeah. Book it.
Nate shoots. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how annoyed would we be if Eskridge joined Creed in Kansas City and balled out and won a Super Bowl?
Oh, 50. It would make me so angry because, again, D. Eskridge has been wide receiver heroin for me. I can't get enough. Like, I just get a little taste of it, and I'm just like, hey, give me more. Let's mainline that. Like, because he looks to be so exciting, and he gets me every time, and I'm an idiot for falling for it all the time. So, yes, that would annoy me a great deal.
I think that there were quite a few Seahawks fans out there who were excited just because it's like taking the heroin and shipping it off and saying, see, now it's gone. You can't have it. And you're like, oh, thank goodness. I was so tempted by having it here close by. And
right. Yeah. And the extra annoyance in that would be is I'd get to hear it from my dad about how great D's been for his Chiefs.
Yeah, that would probably be a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
RJ Taylor lives in KC. Please don't let them win another one. It's going to come down to the rest of the league. They're a very good team.
They're a very good team. I don't think that they're worse than last year, which is a little unnerving. Look, it's a little like when the Patriots were on their run or the Bulls in basketball in the 90s. It's easy to get annoyed by greatness. I try to appreciate it as much as possible. But when it gets to the point where Chiefs fans just run their mouths, and they're like barely Chiefs fans, like they say they're a Chief fan, they can name you 3 dudes and then tell you all about how your team sucks. And like when it gets to that point, which is where we're about at now, that's when I start to get annoyed.
Yeah, and you asked them when they started watching the Chiefs, and it was right around the time that Taylor Swift started dating Travis Kelce, and then you know.
Right. Yeah.
So with another question with Eskridge.
Yeah, this one cracked me up from Gatos before you get to the next question, though. That definitely made me chuckle. It's true. It was pretty pebbles too.
Well, so it was this comment about him spraining his ankle pouring cereal that also made me wonder, do you maybe have a little hope then that he would go to a division rival and bring those fans down.
Oh, basically be like an inside job, a mole.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just taking up a roster spot, but to collect a paycheck to almost make it back to being healthy and then have a setback. Because that was the thing that sealed it for me, is when he had his post-game press conference after the punt return, and he was asked about if he was injured in preseason week 2, and he was saying that it was just being, precautionary. He was just being safe.
Right.
It's like if you know that you're on the bubble of a roster in the preseason and you're not hurt or injured, but you're just playing it safe, then I know that, yeah, it's time to move on.
Look, I would love to see him on the Niners roster in this scenario where Ayuk pulls a Le'Veon Bell and just sits out for the season. And so they bring in Eskridge to kind of help shore up the receiver room and then helps take down everything from the inside. That sounds good to me.
Gano saying he would die on the 49ers because they send their receivers over the middle constantly. He probably would not be safe. I don't want that for him. I do in fact want Eskridge to live.
Well, he would just not show up like he always does. And yeah, just basically burn a roster spot.
All right. Well, really want to thank everybody for joining us as we react to the Seahawks 53-man roster. Go ahead, drop some comments in the chat if you want to address anything before we get on out of here. But we are going to have more to talk about in the coming days. We still got quite a bit of time before regular season week 1 and the stupid Denver Broncos. But I am looking forward to it, Adam.
It's not quite a bit of time. It's right around the corner. We're ramping up for it. Let's get fired up. I can't wait for this season.
I can't wait for the season. I can't wait for the stupid Broncos. Bring them on.
Bring them on. And with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.